Hello.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the SDG Kenya Forum BBI dissemination meeting. We're just giving a few more minutes. Give us like 2 more minutes for us to get started. Thank you. George has joined us, so George will be doing a welcoming, some welcoming remarks in about 2 minutes. Thank you.
I can't hear.
Okay, so
George, I can hear now.
Okay, so welcome everyone for this discussion about the BBI and gender SDG number 5. We are really excited to be able to host you, and thanks for finding time so that you can participate in this meeting. We did commission an analysis of we did commission an analysis of the BBI to just look at it in regards to how it relates with SDG number 5 on gender issues. And as we are all aware, definitely there is a lot of discussion out there in regards to the Building Bridges initiative. Does it empower Wanjiko or does it disempower Wanjiko? What are its impacts in line with where Kenya wants to go? So this analysis was really looking at how we can be able to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls in line with the Constitution of Kenya, but really just focusing on what did the Building Bridges initiative propose. So today we'll have a forum where we'll be looking keenly into what came out of this analysis, which was really interrogating the proposed BBI reform agenda, looking at the existing gender laws, issues of equality, what kind of judicial precedence was there, and what kind of issues do we need to think about if we are going to have a more inclusive society that holistically incorporates gender equality and the dynamics around that. So really grateful that you are here with us, and we do look forward to the engagement. Your wonderful contribution also to this report will be appreciated so that we can even make it much better. And I think at this juncture, I'd just like to say welcome everyone. I'm George Awala. I'm the co-chair of the SDGs Kenya Forum, and I'm also the country director for VSO. And as you're aware, the SDGs Kenya Forum is a platform that brings civil society organizations together to really deliberate and have deeper discussions in regards to issues that are pertinent to Kenyans. And happy to have this engagement, and I trust that out of it, we'll be able to have some really concrete things that we can put forward even as stronger recommendations that will enable us to support the attainment of SDG number 5. Thank you very much. Back to you, Rose. You are muted, Rose. Yeah.
Thank you, George, for letting me know that. And thank you so much for those introductory remarks about this analysis. I'm going to turn it over now to Dorothy Otieno, who will facilitate the whole process from now on. And I will come back at a later point for the closing remarks. Over to you, Dorothy.
Thank you very much, Rose, for allowing me this opportunity to moderate this session. And thank you so much, George, for the opening remarks, which kind of give us an overview of what is expected of us from this analysis of the BBI report. And so my name is Dorothy Otieno. I work for FemNet as the project coordinator for the Women's in Leadership program. And our work focus on SDG 5 on gender equality, and I am coordinating a project on women political participation. And I'm honored and to be part of this discussion, which is very key in ensuring that women equality for women is taken into consideration. So to start us off, I will give this opportunity to the consultant to give us the findings of the analysis of the BBI report. And then later on, I will be inviting panelists. We have 6 panelists on board. I will be inviting them later on to be able to respond to the issues, the emerging issues from the BBI report. So I want to welcome the consultants to join in. Thank you very much.
Kenneth Odari, I see you're muted. Over to you. So please, if you can unmute yourself and start the presentation.
Hi, Kenneth. Kenneth, good morning. Hi, Kenneth.
Okay, if we can't find him, maybe Rose, you can set the tone, and then if he is able to join, or okay, someone else from the forum, Eva. Yeah.
Give me 2 minutes. I try and reach him. He should be available. And I see he has unmuted himself, so he should be coming up. Kenneth, please take over.
Yes, Kenneth.
Rose, I think he's having a problem with his mic, so allow me to switch on him onto another computer as you introduce the presenters.
Okay, that's fine. So Dorothy, quickly, if you can start off with a quick introduction of the other presenters as we wait for Ken to switch the computers. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Maybe I should start with myself because I'm not sure I introduced myself very quickly. My name is Rose Olwoch. Most of you who would be here may know me. Those who do not know me, I work as the program manager for SDG Kenya Forum. We commissioned this BBI analysis because we wanted to understand how it is speaking and what are some of the gains and losses that would impact on the SDG 5. As you know that as a forum, one of the SDG goals that we are keenly involved in is SDG 5. So after we started the analysis, we wanted actually to have this meeting last week, but then there was the amendment that happened, the constitutional amendment that happened last week. So we had to quickly look at what came out of that amendment and then see whether it is in line with the analysis that we had done. So that is why we had to move the meeting to happen today instead of last week. So we are looking forward to what Ken has come up with, and we are looking forward to a very vibrant discussion amongst our speakers as well as all of you. Once again, karibuni sana. Over to you, Dorothy.
Thank you so much, Rose. Thank you so much, Rose, for that brief introduction. Allow me to introduce our panelists. In our panel, we have Ms. Wanja Maina, who is representing the persons with disabilities. Ms. Wanja is an international development specialist and a budding politician with a decade of successful experience in disability rights and advocacy, gender mainstreaming, and communications for development. Wanja is also a storyteller and also the founder of the Hummingbird Initiative. She has a master's degree in gender. She's actually finalizing her master's degree in gender and development, and Wanja will bring in her expertise regarding issues to do with disability rights advocacy, gender mainstreaming, and communication for development. Also in our panel, we have Mr. Paddy Onyango. Mr. Paddy is an alumnus of University of Nairobi, where he took his political science, and University of London, where he did his Bachelor of Laws. He's currently the managing partner of PAT Consultants, dealing with governance and development consultancy. He also served as a technical expert and co-convener of legislative and statutory subcommittee of the BBI, and he has worked in countries from conflict and fragility areas. He has also served in the government task force on operationalizing devolution as prescribed in the Constitution 2010. Mr. Paddy has also worked as a board member at the NCPWD, that is the National Council of Persons with Disability, where he worked on Citizen Coalition for Constitutional Culture, and he has also served as a Deputy Director and Program Officer at the Education Center for Women in Democracy. He's also an international expert. He was an international expert during the South Africa's constitutional negotiation and has been a former prisoner of conscience, having been subjected to 3 months of torture, cruel degradation, and inhuman treatment at the Nyayo House torture chamber, and thereafter detained without trial. So his expertise in this area of special interest group would really be critical in us analyzing the BBI report. Also allow me to introduce Ms. Diana Sifuna, who will be representing the youth category in the BBI analysis. Diana is a public policy and governance specialist, and she's the founder of Diversity with Diana podcast, where they address issues to do with inclusive diversity, good governance, and tech innovation, among others. She's also the director of Uamuzi App Limited, a groundbreaking digital platform that brings elected and nominated leaders to their constituents. Diana is a career advisor on Prosper App, Kenya's first professional development service. She's the recipient of the 2020 Ford Foundation Grant on Leadership and Governance. Ms. Sifuna brings on board 12 years of professional experience in media production, and she's also worked at the youth agenda, championing for youth inclusion, and also advisory committee for Deliver for Goods campaign. Mrs. Diana, in addition, has worked in the private sector and has vast experience in media, where she worked at the CNN. She also brings on board expertise on development issues, through international development partners, non-governmental organization, and private sector. She also has special interests and has been dedicated to human rights as a human rights activist, and with a focus on investment in women, youth, and PWDs. And so, karibu sana, Diana.
So Dorothy, sorry, maybe we start off. I see Ken is ready, so perhaps we could go on, and then we can come back to the introductions as the speakers speak. Thank you very much.
That's great. Karibu sana, Ken.
Thank you. Once again, thank you, Eva, for rescuing me from the technology mishap, and apologies to everyone. My name is Kenneth Odari. As you've been told already, I was engaged by SDG Kenya to undertake an analysis of the BBI report. And once we had our report, we then had to contend with the bill that had now been launched. So this particular presentation takes into account the initial report that was done by the task force, and thereafter we will get into the changes that are now being confirmed out in the Constitutional Amendment Bill 2020. Let me just point out early enough that there isn't a significant difference in terms of what our findings, what my findings or our findings showed. But since the bill has concretized a number of things, this informed the way we then processed the recommendations and changed a little bit of things just to then address what is in the constitutional bill. So I'll get into it and say that from the very beginning, when we started this particular assignment, the intention. Hi, can you?
Could you expand your screen, make it full screen, please? Thank you.
That's better?
Thank you. Good, thank you.
Yes.
Proceed.
Okay. So when we started this particular assignment, the key task was quite clear, was to identify some of the gaps and challenges that pertaining to gender equality and women and girls empowerment with respect to what the BBI was proposing, but also with respect to the Constitution of Kenya 2010. And part of the terms of reference required me to highlight the gains that had been attained, identify some of the challenges that were impeding the complete attainment of those gains, look at the BBI 9-point agenda and see how then it relates to the current context and what it was proposing going into the future, and provide some recommendations. For this particular presentation, I have what I will be presenting. I'll just provide a brief background to the whole BBI process, provide an insight into the gains that were attained with the current constitution, look at some of the challenges, and then identify what were the implications on SDG 5. Then we'll briefly look into the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill and what are some of those key items of analysis that I feel jumped out in terms of maybe some sort of like shortcomings or something that needs to be done, maybe going into the future. And also a few of the recommendations aligned to the very particular targets within SDG 5. From the very beginning, when I started this analysis, is that I identified SDG 5 with respect to issues of the Constitution. There were at least 9 targets of SDG 5, out of which 8 had been, in one way or the other, addressed through the Constitution of Kenya. This included target 5.1, end all forms of discrimination against all women, where we see a number of articles, 2, Article 10, and Article 27, all of which sort of like talk to issues around ending all forms of discrimination. Under target 5.2, we also see those Article 29, Article 45, Article 31, which again address issues around eliminating all forms of violence against women and girls. In the same token,
okay, you're back.
Yeah,
okay, continue.
Yeah. In the same token, under 5.3, we also see there are also some critical gains with respect to eliminating all harmful practices covered under Article 44, Article 53, and Article 55. Besides that, in terms of target 5.4, we also see that there were some aspects around recognizing the value of unpaid care work and domestic work, which is one of those key areas that are still outstanding. So the reading of Article 10, and particularly Part D, really tries to sort of like address to this particular issue under 5.4. Sorry. Under 5.5, which really talks to issues around women's full and effective participation in leadership. Here we see there was a raft of articles sort of like intended to help achieve this SDG in a way. So here from Article 27, Article 38, Article 54, 55, and the list is quite long. A lot of these articles really spoke to how we were going to get women and marginalized persons into positions of leadership. Then under 5.6, which was about ensuring universal access to sexual and reproductive health, under Article 43, I think this was one of the clearest gains. And Part A, where it talks to the highest attainable standard of health, which includes the right to healthcare services, including reproductive healthcare. And Article 5.7, here we, or rather under target 5.7, undertake reforms to give women equal rights to economic resources, again, with respect to the constitutions under Article 40, Article 45, and Article 60. This was made quite clear, and I picked it up as a key gain under the Constitution of Kenya. Under target 5.9, which was about adopting and strengthening sound policies and enforceable legislation. Again, here there were also a raft of other articles there are those articles that already been covered under target 5.5, talking about leadership, which largely talks to the part around legislation for the promotion of gender equality, but also other articles like 55, which talks to youth, 56, which talks to minorities and marginalized groups, and Article 203, talking to issues around equitable share and other financial laws. And I want us to bear in mind some of these articles as we move into the next bit, because under this targets, it's only target 5.8, which largely talked to about the use of technology to empower women, that there wasn't any, I couldn't map directly any particular article in the Constitution to that particular target. Moving forward, part of the assignment also required that, looking into the Constitution and looking at the gains and asking myself then, why is it that some of these gains have not really translated into gender equality and empowerment of women and girls and other marginalized groups? And one of the key challenges, it was about implementation. The other bit that that also jumped out was just the legislative impasse, and thirdly was litigation related to judicial decisions that may come up in the near future. Under the implementation challenge, and this has been quite evident, was that a lot of the gender functions remain grossly underfunded, both at the national and county government level. With respect to legislative impasse, I think it has become common for us to be treated to the drama around the allocation and division of revenue between the National Assembly, Senate, and Executive, or budgetary tussles between the county executive and county assemblies. What this does with respect to gender is that one, there's a lot of delay in the release of funds, which in many ways then impacts on gender responsive aspects. But the other bit also is just to in terms of the legislative impasse, has been the unfulfillment of the 2/3 gender rule, especially at the national level, where we've seen Parliament go through one process after the other without actually getting to the point where they were able to agree that this was the way to go about. The other challenge that we see in terms of the legislative impasse is taken from the county assemblies, where nominated MCAs, mostly women, who are selected so that to ensure that there's the balance in the county assembly with respect to 2/3. In terms of leadership at the county assembly, they've really been sidelined, and nothing showed this contempt for women leaders than the decision by Nakuru MCAs, or the chief whip then, who de-whipped the nominated MCAs, and it was a case that was challenged by Ngek in court, and which resulted in a favorable ruling to Ngek, which then directed the Nakuru Assembly to reinstate the women into leadership positions. Of course, by then the ship had sailed, but it was critical. Which brings me to my third challenge, which is related to the judicial decisions. Topmost has been when we had the initial advisory from the Supreme Court, which talked about the progressive realization of the 2/3 gender rule. I think it removed the urgency to then achieve the 2/3 gender rule. The other bit also was that there was a bit around where we've seen a lot of cases or jurisprudence that has now emerged, especially around the age of consent, which has a lot of implications with regards to issues around sexual violence, that has now been put out in the public for engagement by the Supreme Court and the courts generally. And it's something that we haven't seen being taken up sort of like to try and then legislate based on some of those critical decisions that have arisen from the courts. Similarly, we've seen a lot of succession cases where women right to property has increasingly been challenged, especially in cases where they were cited as only to have provided, moral support, or they largely engage in reproductive roles in those relationships. And when we got to the point where they needed to get their fair share, the courts have deterred in terms of the way they've ruled. So we've seen, I think we started at 50-50, then slowly it has progressed, and the judiciary is trying its best to apply itself to unpaid care work in a way. But we haven't really got to a point where we can say, yes, this is how it's supposed to be rewarded. So some of these things are really sticking out in terms of judicial decisions. The other bit, lastly, on this is that we also have some very curious constitutional challenges. And one of the most prominent is the case by Dr. Tatu, where she's challenging the constitutionality of FGM. It's a case that is ongoing, but I'm sure for us who are in this sector, we understand what the implications would be if the ruling would be not in favor of, if the ruling goes in favor of Dr. Tatu. Beyond that, I also looked at the challenges that the BBI had identified. And part of looking at it was to go through the 9-point agenda. And under the national ethos, it was clear that the lack of national ethos was only detrimental to women, girls, and generally all marginalized groups, because we ended up having double or triple marginalization. So, for instance, you're a woman, you come from a poor community, but then also in that particular community, you also just marginalized further because of patriarchy. And on top of that, maybe you haven't gone to school. So a lot of sort of like domino effects that then lend to a deeper marginalization. In terms of responsibility and rights, we've seen less respect for the rights of women, especially survivors of violence. We saw how the DPP at some point tried to pursue the post-election rape cases, and which then collapsed with respect to the women who had been raped. We've also seen in terms of ethnic antagonism and competition, and good thing that BBI captured it was that it has not only deepened patriarchy, but it has also it has sort of like increased male dominance. And we've seen this with respect to even issues as when during elections, when you have things like negotiated democracy and such like things. In terms of the divisive elections, one of the key things the BBI report by the task force did was to say that the first past the post system and the subsequent proportionate representation through party lists had not translated into more women being elected. And I think the statistics are out there, and they provide the best detail on how this has been. In terms of inclusivity, overall is that our society still remains highly unequal. And I think nothing showed this more than this season of Corona or COVID-19 emergency, where we've seen how our society is highly unequal. In terms of the shared prosperity, there's no doubt that women, girls, youth, persons living with disability have been left significantly behind economically, and they continue being left behind economically. In terms of corruption, it's something that has been of concern to all Kenyans, but the BBI further say that in terms of just the pilferage of resources is denying delivery of services. And from our own point, in terms of the SDG 5, this denial of services affects more women, girls, youth, and persons living with disability disproportionately, because at the end of it, they're the ones who really depend on these public funds for delivery of services, and when it's not there, they're the ones who hurt the most. In terms of devolution, there was a consensus that county governments are under-resourced and cannot deliver on the devolution promise. And from our own point, from an SDG 5 point of view, is that in terms of resources, then it meant that county governments cannot be gender responsive in how they spend their resources. In terms of safety and security, I think the statistics out there, and they sort of like give a sense of what has been going on. But beyond that, we know how the emergency services and prevention services are very under-resourced. In terms of the impact to SDG 5, from the 9-point agenda, I think 6 of these areas, there was going to be some sort of like impact that will then have an effect on how we implement SDG 5. And the most important was the inclusion under the responsibilities and rights, the clause under Article 31 on protection of personal data. Under divisive election, the BBI task force was very clear that we need to sort of like find a better accommodation, and here they proposed the mixed member proportional representation. In terms of inclusivity, I think there was concern, and they really wanted to then use the MPPR to ensure that women and other marginalized groups find themselves in leadership. Sort of like achieving the 2/3 gender rule for elective positions at the national level and county level. In terms of the shared prosperity, from the BBI report, I think it was quite clear where they wanted to do the youth commission as one of those key architecture institutional things that they needed to input into the constitution to take care of the interest of the youth, alongside other gender equality principles that had been factored in several other areas. In terms of devolution, they suggested some increase in terms of the shareable revenue. And further, then beyond that, they also suggested a ratio on how the money would be spent at the county level. In terms of safety and security, again, I'll circle back to the Article 31 on personal data protection, which for purposes of SDG 5 is quite critical in terms of protecting women and girls. Beyond that, just as we were trying to digest our analysis and report, then the changes, the Constitution Amendment Bill 2020 was brought to the fore. And again, we were then I was asked to then look at it, and from looking at it, I tried to look at it across the different areas of SDG 5, which really talks to issues around discrimination, issues around violence, unpaid care work, and the rest of the targets. And under this particular Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill, again, under target 5.1 and 5.2, Article 31 on personal data infringement, on the protection of personal data, I think that was one of the gains again that we see. In terms of 5.4, I think there was the insertion of 18A in terms of the Bill of Rights, where they talk, especially under Clause B, where we want to promote and protect the well-being of the family, including respect of their parents and elders. But generally, a reading of this particular area really identifies very well, or maps very well, with 5.4 in terms of recognition and value unpaid care work and domestic work. But the bulk of the changes under the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020 are really mapped to 5.5, which is about ensuring women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership. And here a lot of the amendments in the bill actually really tie into this particular SDG. And the aim of these particular amendments is largely to ensure that women take up their place and that we respect the constitutional principle around the 2/3. In terms of the 5.9, target 5.9, again, a lot of other amendments also related to this. And I'll be able to sort of like try and link some of this to some of the gaps that then I think were quite critical. In terms of article, or rather the SDG target 5.5, where we see there's a lot of well-intended amendments to ensure that women then participate, and not only women, but persons living with disability, youth. One is that we have an over-reliance in the whole bill and even in the report on political party structure or political parties to sort of like push this conversation ahead. But in reality, I think our political parties have done little in terms of being able to formulate policies that enhance women, youth, and people living with disabilities participation. And not only that, we see that political parties tend to still be in the way they are formed in Kenya. They're still very personal in their nature. They remain one of the most unreformed institutions, and so banking a lot of the amendments, the realization of the amendments under or related to target 5.5 to or depending on political parties as vehicles for achieving these particular amendments, I think will be one of the greatest sort of like it may lead us to implementation challenges, because these particular institutions tend, as again, they have policies, and these things, they tend to change all the time. And it's one area that, as civil society, we have never really had an insight on how to engage with political parties. So the political parties may not be the best vehicle, as identified under a lot of the aims of trying to fulfill target 5.5 of getting women into leadership. The other bit is that the key gain that we've seen in terms of devolution has been the increase in terms of funding. And there's no doubt that that funding is needed. And for the purposes of BBI, the amendment bill, we see now there's the NGO, the national government, CDF, we have the World Development Fund, in addition to the overall increase in shareable revenue. But again, we are increasing the money in terms of the money going to the grassroots. But in reality, do we have accountability mechanisms to ensure that these monies are used or is used in a manner that then would respond to the gender needs at that level? The other sticking point, and which is quite obvious, was that persons living with disability in the Constitution have been assigned 5% of all elective positions. So I think, like for instance, in the National Assembly, if it is 360 members, 18 of them would require to be persons living with disability. However, this seems not to have been taken into account. Rather, there was some introduction of some seats, I think two or three seats, which I think falls way short for people living with disability. Besides that, we also see at the Senate, where we have the seats allocated on a 50-50 basis. Again, persons living with disability, I think this is some area that they may have fallen short, because they've always had a representative in that legislative body. In terms of the scrapping of the county women representative seats, I think whereas this was done so as to ensure that then other seats could be created within the National Assembly, but I think for the SDG 5, the critical thing has been will be the doing away of the National Government Affirmative Action Fund. And this we know from experience, especially there are some women reps who've been cited as being quite innovative in the way they've been able to use this fund in a way that it has resonated with all the people within the constituency. I'll give you an example of the Narok women rep, whom in a study that I was involved in, and we were interviewing people at the village, and they really cited the Narok women rep as having done more on issues of water than any other time that the people within Narok had leadership. And so this is so this is one area that there'll be a definite loss in terms of SDG 5. The other bit also is in terms of the clause on data protection. Of course, rights protect everybody, but the key thing in terms of this particular clause, and my biggest worry was that could this clause be used by perpetrators to protect themselves? So these are things that maybe we need to interrogate, and how then can this clause be sort of like, can we have a limitation to it with respect to people who engage in violence, especially as highlighted in SDG 1, 2, 3. You don't want people who have been engaged in violence or gender-based violence, and this violence maybe has been captured electronically, and then they use this clause to say that, you know what, you cannot infringe on my data. And I think experience from the US, and not related to SGBV directly, but with respect to the issues of terrorism, we saw how at some point the FBI struggled to get data from a suspect's phone, because they couldn't enforce access through the courts, and so they had to hack into the phone. So these are some of the things that maybe we need to think of, especially with respect to GBV. As a way of sort of like then informing what would be our contribution to the whole process, was that perhaps, and related to my last statement, was the provision for limitations on the use of data as a way of addressing some of the SDG under target 1, but also target 2, which really talks about discrimination and violence. Again, and perhaps this hadn't been highlighted in the BBI report, and we don't know what the next process will be legislatively, but the idea would be then, if we are going to then achieve this data protection, that also they maybe need to review all cyber crime and cyber security laws to ensure that it aligns quite well with or reinforces data protection measures. In terms of target 5.5, again, it talks to the point where I talked about issues around political parties. They are not, according to my analysis and the history of political parties in Kenya, I don't think they are maybe the best vehicles, and so they maybe need to strengthen political parties. I know in the main report there was the talk of having county-based sort of like branches of parties, but this seems to have been lost somewhere. We also see they maybe need to actually engage with the political liaison committee and also the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties to ensure that parties can actually do this. I think in the constitutional bill that we've seen, it's only the IEBC that has been tasked to oversee that these parties are able to sort of like enforce, say, party lists. But I think that responsibility needs also to be shared with ORPP, and sort of like then bring on board also the PPLC to then ensure that parties are able to do this. Otherwise, from my own point of view, is that we may see a situation whereby, yes, parties will go ahead, they may even field women, but they'll field them, for instance, in areas where they feel like, we don't have really strength just to meet the numbers, and they can never miss those areas. So in a way, we need also to ensure that parties are able to nominate or are compelled to nominate women to vie in their strongholds. I think, to me, having even some mechanism or some sanctions, maybe around funding, how many women did you nominate and how many were from your strongholds, that kind of thinking needs to perhaps start informing the way parties will then engage women, so that women are not just top-ups, but they come in directly. And part of this will be important because then they have access to national government, CDF, and say the ward funds, and they're able to then use them to prioritize on issues that are responsive to women, girls, youth, and marginalized populations. I think there's no doubt that the persons living with disability, I think it is clear that perhaps we may need to look for more accommodation to ensure that at least their 5%, they get their 5% representation in all bodies of representation. Further to that, I mentioned the issue around the national government affirmative action funds. I think at this point, it may be important to then, if this boat has sailed with respect to amendments, I think then there may be need either to then introduce a statute to sort of ensure that the national government affirmative action funds and its intended mission, especially from the kind of experiences we've had with women reps, is not lost, so that then these funds can continue doing the good work that it has been doing. In terms of target 9 at 5.9, there's need to ensure that we have accountability mechanisms that can then ensure that spending is tracked and spent on priority issues. I think this is quite important, especially when you're talking about participatory budgeting, where women, youth, and people living with disability are involved. I think it's quite important that then they become part and parcel of this. So we may require some accountability mechanism. And on this, I would like to point out that either having stronger protections for whistleblowers, or stronger protection for people who then do the tracking, because a lot of the budgetary issues tend to get lost, whereby there's collusion and we don't have people who can speak out. There's also the bit around provision of gender as a concurrent and cross-cutting function. I think looking at the Constitution of Kenya, you'll realize where we have where we have the functions stated, gender is not listed as a function. And but nonetheless, we've always had a situation whereby we have the gender ministries at the national and county levels. But looking at reading the Constitution, you'll see that we don't have that aspect. And so this then will tie into the next recommendation, which will be then to allocate 30% of the development vote to gender departments at county level, towards realizing all the targets under SDG 5. There's need to build the capacity of all elected persons, on issues around gender principles, and also at the same time also increase the capacity of county-based CSOs to engage at the county level on public policy. Thank you. I tried to be as brief as possible to save on time.
Thank you so much, Ken. Thank you so much for that elaborate report. And now I will welcome this session. I will welcome the panelists just to take us through the learnings from the BBI analysis. And I had started by introducing the panelists, but I'll just go very fast into introducing them for those who had not joined us before. We have 6 panelists on board. We have Ms. Diana Sifuna. Diana will bring in expertise on youth inclusion. Diana is a public policy and governance specialist. She's a founder of Diversity with Diana podcast, where she speaks a lot about inclusive diversity, good governance, and technology in innovation. I'll also introduce Tabitha Nyambura, who is a gender expert. Nyambura works with the National Gender and Equality Commission, and she'll bring in a lot of expertise in trying to look deeply on the women inclusion on the BBI report. We also have Paddy Onyango. Paddy will be focusing on the special interest group. Paddy has a wide experience on conflict and fragility areas, working on special interest groups. We also have on board Wanja Maina. Wanja will be talking about the PWDs, which has elaborately been talked about, issues to do with persons with disability. We also have Mr. Tom Kagwe, who will be talking on the constitutional affairs. I'm sorry, because of time, I could not delve so much into their profile, but these are experts in the various fields that we've mentioned, and they will be helping us to unpack this debate and also give us their expertise and personal experience on the same. So I will start off with Tabitha. Tabitha, just to start off, when you speak about gender equality, there has been a perception that gender is a women issue. And so even as you start to unpack the findings of the analysis, could you tell us why the focus is so much on women, yet gender cuts across men and women? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dorothy, and good morning to everyone. I think Dorothy has decided to pick on me because I have another meeting that is starting now where I'm a host. So I'll quickly give my input, and first is to appreciate what has been done by our consultant, a very well comprehensive analysis on issues of gender. And yes, one of the challenges that has been there on issues of gender is the misconception of gender to mean women. And I think this is rooted from how gender is ascribed to the roles and responsibilities of men and women. And so there has been a feeling that everything we speak about is about women. And the main reason is because of the historical marginalization or discrimination that they have gone through, including also other marginalized groups. So we're still struggling with that and working very hard to ensure that everyone accepts that gender is not about women, but gender is about all of us, men and women, and also looking at the different needs, the different concerns, and the different interests that men and women have, and how that hindered them from accessing, controlling, and benefiting from the different opportunities and the different resources. But this morning, I'm pretty excited to be part of this discussion. One, by the fact that this year, 2020, was set to be the year of milestones for women and gender equity. And why I say this is because globally, it has been 5 years into Sustainable Development Goals. It's now 10 years since the establishment of the UN Women. It's 20 years since the landmark of UN Security Council resolution on women, peace, and security. And we know that this country last year, I think this year, we launched the Kenya National Action Plan on Resolution 1325, so that we are able to ensure that women are also engaged in management and promotion of peace and security in this country. It has been 25 years. We just celebrated the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, marking the 25 years. And this is a framework that really brings out the understanding in terms of transformed partnership based on equality and between women and men. In Kenya here, it's 1 year since we enumerated our population, and appreciating that we are a youthful country, and the fact that women and men are almost the same in terms of population in number, and then brings out the importance of us thinking of, looking at how are these two appreciating or accessing the development agenda. Then 10 years since the promulgation of the Constitution. And in this, then we are saying it's very important first to appreciate that women have come from far, a long way, in terms of the legal recognition of their rights and the enactment of registration and development policies that would ensure their rights are upheld. And so when we look at the Constitution and also listening to what the consultant was telling us, it is, yes, there has been gender sensitive laws that have been enacted. And also we've seen policies being developed, and of course, having establishment of institutions that are gender aware or that advocate for issues of gender. So the SDG then comes out and identifies gender inequality as one of the key challenges that will continue to exact negative effects on key sectors of the economy. So we are appreciating that, yes, the policy and the legal framework, we've seen some, positive interventions where there exist, but when it comes to implementation, of course, that has been an issue and a problem. And also, as misconception continues that gender is about women, there is also another challenge of intersectionality, so that when people are just thinking about women, then we forget quickly that these women have different needs, they have different concerns and different interests. So that if we are speaking about women, we have to bring on board to realize and accept that women are not the same. And also men are not the same. We have women with disabilities. We have women who are youth. We have the girl child who has different needs. We have women from marginalized and minority communities and groups. So when we accept that women are not homogeneous and the men are not homogeneous, then I think going forward in anything that we are developing or we are coming up with in this country, then we'll be able to ask ourselves the hard question of how then do we address, how do we respond to those needs, concerns, and interest? So looking at the targets in the SDG and as well put in the presentation, the establishment of gender machinery, especially the institutions, we have seen an increase or impactful implementation, especially by the ministries in charge, the ministry in charge of gender, as well as the accountability part where the National Gender and Equality Commission has played a role. Yeah, we accept and appreciate, appreciate the realization that budget has been an issue in terms of, funding institutions that are really working hard to ensure that we achieve gender equality and promote issues of inclusion. But having such institution also has brought a bit of difference from where we are coming from. There has been intergovernmental framework, where you'll find like now the national government and the county government have come up with a framework on how well do they address issues of gender. And that's working. And like in 28 counties, there has been establishment of equality and inclusion technical working groups. And you'll find that in those technical working groups, then the county government is working with the national government and also bringing on board the CSOs that are in different counties, as well as the private sector. The affirmative action programs also have been, launched, and this aim in empowering and uplifting women and girls. So that is another thing that the Constitution has given us. as much as there might be some challenges here and there, but the fact that we've seen affirmative action funds, initiatives like Inua Jamii, where social protection issues are addressed, and the fact that in regards to the social protection, we've seen a single registry that has been launched to ably link all intervention to address duplication. And what the counties now are being advised is to link the programs that they are budgeting or thinking about on social protection to the single registry. Then the coordination had been a problem, and I think it has come out clearly in the report. Coordination of institutions and individuals that are working on issues gender. But I can say so far so good, because out of the intergovernmental framework and also having clarity now on the different mandates and functions of ministries that are working on issues of gender, as well as commission like the National Gender and Equality Commission and the county government, we've seen a change in terms of coordination, so that we are able to know and really monitor and evaluate the different interventions that institutions are implementing, and also advising clearly so that we avoid a duplication. Then the county governments, I think Ken mentioned this, that yes, we have ministries, we have departments in charge of gender issues. For us, that is a plus because when you go to the county governments, in the first dispensation, this was an issue. You'd find county governments that really were not very keen to work on issues of gender. But in the second dispensation, that has started to change. And for me, I would say this is because even the government at the national level has agreed to incorporate a gender indicator in the performance contracting process, where all the public institutions, be they the technical institutions, the ministries, the state corporations, and also the county governments, are required to, on a quarterly basis, report back to the Commission and the Ministry of Public Service and Gender in terms of how they're implementing issues of gender. So I'm just trying to unpackage so that it doesn't look like, when you look at the SDG and the Constitution, just bringing out the fact that there has been practical activities and practical interventions that have bore results on issues of gender. Recently, there was just the launch of the national police, the Polycare concept. And this one will help in terms of how police respond to issues of gender-based violence. Institutions like Commission, we are in the process of reviewing the sexual gender-based violence information system, because as well clearly put, if we do not have data, if we don't invest in data, as much as we'll have even reports like BBI and have provisions therein, then it will be very difficult to inform policy and of course issues of advisory. So for me, I would say that there has been, there has been achievements that can be counted on in terms of the Constitution and the SDG 5. But I do appreciate that, yes, there are still challenges that will need to be addressed. And one of the challenges that we've seen a lot is this retrogressive implementation of some of the laws, and here I would say by the judiciary, like if you look at the advisory opinion by the CJ on the 2/3, and Ken mentioned this, that instead when the case was whether or not 2/3 gender rule should be actualized immediately or progressively. And of course, the CJ then opted to pick the progressive. So this was, a backward move, because the principle was set up as an affirmative action so that it would reverse the discrimination of women in the leadership and decision-making spheres. So the retrogressive implementation has been a big challenge, and also the existence of other systems of law which coexist with formal laws like the customary law. So you'll find like the female genital mutilation still persists in some communities despite the existence of the Anti-FGM Act. You know, we have the Children's Act, the Prohibition of Domestic Violence Act. But because of the competition between the customary law and what is there in the Constitution, then of course that has been a challenge. The lack of political goodwill, also that has been seen as a challenge, and of course the budget allocation. And so the civil society and of course institutions that are gender aware and advocating for gender issues, if we are able to really, you know, advocate for budget allocations, as well as, of course, implementing the accountability measures, then I think we'll be able to advance the issue gender agenda. As I add, looking at the BBI, just looking at the BBI, we've seen the gender gains, like the 50-50 representation in the Senate. And I think here, the feel is that if women are able to get to the Senate, and the Senate is the one that determines county allocation, which is now 35% and 5% going to the World Development Fund, then women senators can be able to, you know, propose a county fund allocation formula. And of course, they'll be able to look at issues, economic, social, you know, the ECOSOC rights, like the water connectivity, and ensure 100% water connection. They can reinforce the 5% of county funds, maybe to fund more the women economic empowerment. The other gain that you've seen is the Council of Governors, where they're saying they will have 2 nominees and one of them will be a woman. And the beauty about this is that the county revenue formula is generated by the CRA. And then the county allocation formula will be able to look at issues of the 2/3. Then when you look at the county government, I'll not mention all, but the fact that there will be opposite gender with the deputy governor assigned a portfolio, then that also becomes an entry for women. There are various gains. If I had time, would really discuss about this. But as I said, it's also good to appreciate the challenges that have been faced while implementing the Constitution, and ask ourselves the question in terms of how then do we ensure that implementation of what goes to the BBI, if it goes through, then are achieved and realized by both men and women, and not forgetting the special interest groups.
Thank you so much, Tabitha. Thank you so much for that elaborate presentation. You've mentioned quite well that the Constitution has brought with it several gains that we are proud of as a country. And probably from my end, I'm just wondering, is it like we need more time to ensure full implementation, or what is required? Again, you mentioned something to do with you actually unpacked what gender means. And for me, I would have also wanted to hear from you the issue of merging women and persons with disability and youth and the special interest group. Could that also be a barrier into the achievement of SDG Goal 5? So probably you will answer that later, but now I want to introduce Wanja Maina. Wanja brings on board expertise on persons with disability. And so Wanja, before you get in, I would want to ask you to tell us what are some of the gains? I know the Constitution has a provision of 5%, sorry, of 5% representation in all levels, legislative, appointive positions. So what are some of the gains that the Constitution has brought on board in relation to the persons with disability? And what are some of the gaps that needs to be addressed? Thank you so much, Wanja. And I will ask all the speakers kindly, as we represent, please switch on your videos so that we could also see you. Thank you so much. Karibu sana, Wanja. Yes, Wanja, we can't hear you.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. Do you want my video to be on or off?
At least we've seen your face. If you can maintain your video, that's good. Good. I think good. Yes. Continue.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Dorothy. I'm following you live and direct from Nyeri County. I'm here doing COVID sensitization.
People with disabilities, because there have been a lot of gaps in terms of COVID-19, people with disabilities, community engagement, information dissemination. And so I think it's good to just start it off from the point of COVID, and I'll sort of tie it up to the discussion that we're having. Since COVID came, COVID has confirmed what we already know, that people with disabilities always come last in terms of development projects, in terms of budget allocation. In fact, when the people who are holders of budget do budget allocation, people with disabilities and their needs are an afterthought. It's therefore not surprising that people with disabilities are only remembered during Christmas, when the wife of the MP or the governor will go somewhere to a children's home, take photos and look very philanthropic. Something we highly disagree with, because we believe that if you don't budget, and basically what I'm saying is that COVID, which is a health pandemic, ties it up to the kind of resources that are budgeted for people with disabilities, and even the general societal perception of people with disabilities. For instance, should we, for example, have to go for such long miles to look for resources to sensitize our people? You've asked me a very good question, Dorothy, about the gains of the Constitution. I'll start by saying that in the Constitution and in many other laws across the world, sometimes legislation has to be really prescriptive and to the T and to the detail, and this is because of protection of marginalized people. That is why, for instance, the women were able to convince the people at the making of the 2010 Constitution that they should specifically say 2/3. Why did they say 2/3? To just remove any doubt, because that's a finite number you can calculate, so that if you are 9 of us, we know that they should not be less than 3, for instance. It's so unfortunate that while the whole world is gaining from technology, from progression, from all the good things that come with civilization, in Kenya, for instance, people with disabilities are progressively losing. Let's start with the example. In the year 2013, there were 61 people with disabilities in our county assemblies. That then in 2017, while naturally you'd have expected an upward trajectory, people with disability became 42. So while the women were gaining and their numbers were going up, the people with disabilities were going down. If we are to follow that pattern, our biggest fear is that the numbers might go lower. Then BBI, the current topic in every newspaper that we have, constitutionalism, rule of law. One of the things that we've noticed that in Kenya, anything possible if there is a goodwill. Anything is possible in this country if there is a goodwill. You all agree with me that the change in the leadership of the Senate and the Parliament happened within 2 days. They quickly organized, they quickly removed Keheka and Murkomen. In Parliament, they quickly removed Duale. In Senate, they removed Kindiki, and within a week, we had a new House leadership. What does that tell us? That tells us that some of the things that we've been agitating and crying for are not very difficult. It's just that they don't seem to be a priority, they don't seem to be interesting, and there's no political goodwill. If I could go to BBI, for instance, I've always said that some of these things that happen in Kenya do not go wrong, they start wrong. Please note, the things that we've been agitating for do not go wrong, they start wrong. The BBI committee, for instance, you and I will agree with me that there was no representation of people with disabilities in the task force. What does that mean? That means that basically we're in a table eating, we're in a table planning how to do something, but the people who represent their people, their voices are not captured. And you know, there has always been this topic in Kenya where people say, you know, people, I'm here to represent the disabled, this disabled, I'm the voice of the voiceless. And for us, we feel like that, honestly, that is just taking away from us. You're taking away our voice, and then you start saying, you know, those people are voiceless, we are here to represent them. We have never been voiceless. The issue has always been that those people who are setting the high table, or is it the low table, what they do is that they deliberately do not include us. And the other excuse they give is that, oh, you know, these people are not available. And then my question has always been, we are here. At least you could have even put a call of expression of interest, and you tell us that no one responded to it. So our initial reaction to the BBI is that it started wrong, missing critical voices of people with disabilities. And obviously you also notice that it means the critical voices of the youth. Therefore, it was not surprising that in the document that was released in October, all the gains of people with disabilities had evaporated. They had disappeared, lost without a trace. Now, based on that, it just took the goodwill and the lowly resourced people with disabilities to just go back to the square root to start now agitating and communicating. As it is now, the document that we are going to get signatures for, they have said that they'll have 4 people with disabilities in the National Assembly. But then again, it begs the question, if that is the case, and if the same constitution had assured us that in each and every county assembly, there will be 2 people with disabilities in the county assembly, which means that if we were to just follow the constitution as it is, right now we would be having 94 people with disabilities in the county assemblies in Kenya. But as we speak, we only have 42. Then the question is, then what is the role of the political leadership? And the consultants has told us that political leadership in Kenya is owned by individuals. Then what is the role of those individuals who held so much power to ensure that some of the gains that we had, because some of us have always said, even before we go to the BBI, which is promising us heaven and earth, at least please show us some goodwill in at least what had already been secured. So that is my first thing. The second thing is the 2/3 gender rule. You know, women do not like it when people say, oh, women are flower girls, oh, women are just here to get resources from others. But I've always felt like there is an issue of privilege and classism when it comes to the 2/3 gender rule. And here is my argument. Women are not homogeneous. Women are not homogeneous. They come from Women come from very different political persuasions. They come from very different economic way of life. Then should we also ask ourselves, then who will be the people who comprise of the 2/3 gender rule? Because as it is, I feel like it is very selfish for all of us to actually dismiss the concerns of the other women who usually say that these 2/3 are for the women who lives in Nairobi and some high-end hotels. So then if we are talking about the gains of women, then it should be all women and not some women. And of which, when we say all women, then we should be talking about women with disabilities inside of there. Of course, we know that when we have people with disabilities, and it's just to build a case for the need for diversity in leadership. Mheshimiwa Nyokabi, who I really look up to, says that when the men were in the leadership of in top leadership in government, they said that all they need is extra mile. I remember there was the last mile electricity connection in Kenya. But if it were the women in those decisions, then it would have been the last drop, or is it the last water drop? Because for women, water becomes a very critical component compared to the men, for instance. So then the question is, if we are missing critical people in the tables, then you'll also see that the priorities, for instance, will be missing. And therefore, for instance, the issue of NHIF, depending on your needs or depending on the challenges that you have, then NHIF would mean, then NHIF would mean something different depending on your needs. For example, people with disability will be looking at NHIF to cater for pre-existing condition, assistive devices, and so on and so forth. So what am I saying? What I'm saying is that the BBI, in as much as we know that it's a critical part of our country and we know that it's a critical political moment, our biggest fear is that in as much as we want to be involved in the public participation and in as much as we want to be engaged in the discourse, our biggest fear is that history has always shown us that we always come last And it will be unfortunate that even as we support this document for the sake of us being involved in political participation, we might also end up missing, like it has happened in the past. This would be because, for instance, of the lack of goodwill, as I have put it. So then, it brings about the issue of the need for protection, the issue of the need for political goodwill, the issue of the need for also us looking at numbers. This BBI has brought about assistant ministers, for example, and our constitution is talking about 5%. So then what is the 5% of 20 people? Then how will it go to these people? Of course, one of the biggest barriers has always been cultural issues and negative perceptions. People with disabilities are perceived not to be capable. They cannot hold high positions in government. They just need to be pitied for. And then that's something we really need to get rid of. Of course, the other issues around inclusivity and all the other 9 pillars, they are most welcome, because we also know that in the case of divisive elections, for instance, we know who suffers the most. Divisive elections means violence, and if there's violence where I am here, I'm likely to be the one injured the most because I can't run like everybody else. So our main aim, as they talk about citizenship, patriotism, being told that we should be proud of being a member of Kenya, for us, we have always been very patriotic. We have always been people who want to be involved in the activities of Kenya, but Kenya has not been very welcoming. I remember when the PS was talking about kazi kwa vijana to help youth during COVID. The PS talked about they are looking for youth between the ages of 18 to 35 who are able-bodied. So in short, the country is saying that all our programming is relying on physical strength, ability to perform physically, and some of us were saying that we are not very physically fit, but we want to be involved in the national hygiene of the country. And so ours has always been representation everywhere. If it's the village, and also this BBI, I've noticed also, there has been, it's like there's a general perception that it's representation in the political seats. Whereas we need representation in the political seats, I think representation should also cascade down to every other place. If where I am as I speak, maybe I have 1 minute, where I am, for example, in Nyeri as I speak, I would wish to have a disabled person as a member of the market, so that the next time the MP feels philanthropic to build a toilet, that person will say, by the way, make it with a ramp where we can pee in peace. If there is representation in the school board, that disabled girl who goes to school will not be discriminated. If there is discrimination in the Catholic, for instance, or in all the other spheres. So my main issue as at now is the fear that we are focusing more on the 4 seats in the parliament, which are very good, and we are forgetting all the other spheres. Representation in the county service boards, representation in the county executive committees, representation everywhere. So for me, I would say Kenya is a very diverse country. We cannot allow this discussion to be politician-driven only, because we know that they are very short-term, very short-sighted. They think about the next election. But if this document is supposed to change the trajectory of our country, then it has to come to the people. This discussion must come to the people. It must be discussed in depth. There has to be ownership without too much coercion. Of course, there are attempts here and there. But for people with disabilities, I don't know why no one ever talks about the 5%. If the women, we are talking about 2/3, which is around 33%, our 5% has delayed for too long. If it's progressive, surely, even progress has to be measured. So then, will we be still at 5% in 2030, for instance? So for us, it's just to say that we love our country. The BBI was meant to make us solve our historical issues. We love our country, but the country is not loving us back. And we need to be included. We are always ready, actually. We are always ready. This COVID work that we are doing now in Nyeri, it's people with disabilities led. So those excuses, we are not welcoming them. And I look forward to learning from the rest. If I run away, don't blame. It's just that I'm in some other work. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Wanja, and thank you for the sacrifice. I see you multitasking, but thank you for sparing some time to join in. Some critical questions and some critical insights you've raised regarding the inclusion of persons with disability from the inception stage to the implementation stage. the issue about the lacking political goodwill to foster the inclusion of persons with disability. And you say that probably it is a wrong start, even with the BBI, probably it was a wrong start because of the lack of inclusion for persons with disability. And it is true that persons with disability continue to be marginalized, and COVID has really protracted that notion, because you are the people who get to, bear the brunt at the end of the day. And so thank you so much. And that, with your presentation, takes me to the next presenter, who is Mr. Tom Kagwe. And Tom Kagwe will be expounding on the issues to do with the constitutional affairs. And Wanja has raised some critical issues based on the 2010 constitution that needs to be addressed. And so, Tom Kagwe, as you get in, I'm just pondering and saying, the BBI proposal brings on board 50-50 representation at the Senate. Yeah. So is it like we know very well that 50-50 representation can actually be achieved, or what is it in the Senate that is so critical that can only allow the 50-50 representation and not any other position in terms of the executive, in terms of the National Assembly, or at the county assembly point of view? And so thank you so much. Tom Kagwe, welcome. Tom, are you there? Hi, Tom. Is Mr. Tom there?
Yes, he's here. He just needs to unmute his mic.
Okay. Mr. Tom Kagwe, please unmute your mic and give us your analysis of the findings. Thank you. Mr. Tom, please unmute your mic. I can see you're there. Your video is on. Please just unmute your mic and proceed with your presentation. As we wait for Tom to sort out his connection, probably I will just allow Mr. Paddy Onyango to also give us his analysis of the presentation as presented with Kenneth. And some of these things, Kenneth has actually elaborated them in a very clear manner on what issues needs to be addressed at this juncture. And so, Paddy, even as we bring up your experience on the special interest group, what are some of the constitutional gain we've had with the Constitution in regards to the persons in the special interest group, and what are the gains and challenges for that matter? And also in relation to the BBI reports, where are we with the special interest persons? Thank you so much. Paddy, please proceed.
Thank you, Dorothy. Thank you, everybody. I am happy to be here. I can see many of my good friends are also on board. That is great. I had prepared a PowerPoint, but I not, in the interest of time, have it projected, but then I will speak generally about it. One is that since we're discussing BBI, I wanted us to clearly understand how it is framed, how it is structured quickly in maybe 2-3 minutes.
Video.
Is somebody coming on board again?
Hi, Paddy.
Yes, hi, it's everybody. Thank you.
Hey,
now,
Tom Kagwe.
Tom Kagwe is coming on board?
Yeah,
yes,
I've just managed.
Have you seeded
but
your space?
I can't speak before an elder. You speak.
It's okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I can't speak before an elder.
Thank you for respecting our culture.
Thank
that
you
is the
so
way
much.
it ought to be. Yes. Yes, Tom. I've missed you, Adam, for some time now. Now, quickly,
I'll speak after
you. We all know what happened in 2017. Women being raped. In fact, we have evidence. You all know about 85 of them were raped. children being shot dead. You are aware about that. I don't want to mention baby Pendo and the rest. All that we know. That pain, the business coming down, the economy coming to a standstill, and there is evidence that truly this country was going to disintegrate, and it would not be the first or the last if we had not moved to stem that kind of tension that was there before. You all know there's a country called Sudan. It is now 2 countries. We all know there is a country called Yugoslavia. It is now 4 countries. We also have the Soviet Union, USSR. Now it has got about 16 different countries with very strange names, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, those kind of things. Now, Kenya was headed there. And in fact, there were already maps and flags and emblems of the People's Democratic Republic and the Central Republic of Kenya. So these things were real. And then there was going to be, for those of us who know, there was going to be a major bloodbath if something did not happen post by April. Those are some details. I think the people can speak to that. So now, those who contested and who are vicious contenders decided, looked at the situation. I think they must have looked at themselves and said, why must we have a country drenched in blood just because of us? So they came together, shook that hand. What I'm saying is that the handshake calmed temperatures, but the handshake is not the same thing as BBI. The handshake is a political rapprochement, a detente of some kind. Then, to give effect to the 9 points in the communique that was issued by the 2 politicians on the 9th of March, there was a gazettement of the BBI. Now, from that point, the handshake ceded room to a more structured process in the form of a BBI task force. That was number 1. Then that task force went around, collected views in town halls in all the 47 countries, came up with its report on where the problem is, on what people thought should happen to the nine issues that they had identified. Then, like it's with every one of us, when you go out to do a research, when you go out to collect data, you must bring back that data to people who gave you that data so that they do the validation. Now, that is what happened with the second phase, where we had the steering committee on implementation of the task force report. Now, that validation was gazetted again, and it gave people opportunity to look at, yes, you came to us in Elgeyo Marakwet, you came to us in Eldoret, you came to us in Nairobi. These are the things we say. But now we do not see, you have not told us how what we want done is going to be done. And that means BBI 2 was about mechanisms of implementing recommendations that were to resolve problems that were identified in BBI 1. So what I'm suggesting is that for you to understand this BBI well, do not read the report that was launched on 26th in isolation of the report that was launched in November last year. They are linked. One makes recommendations, general recommendations. The second one makes specific recommendations as to the how the recommendations that were contained in the first is to be implemented. So that's number 1. Number 2, in terms of work, the task force had, both the task force and the chair committee had 2 levels. One, the policy body, which in the task force, the first phase was the task force. It had 14 wazees, although I was not a member of the wazees. I was not there then. And then the second one, it was the same Wazes again, gazetted, but the Wazes worked with the secretariat, and the secretariat had a CEO, program officers, and researchers, very competent young people who now to help the Wazes and the secretariat, a team of technical experts were invited based on their experience in various areas. Now, that is how I got invited to engage with the BBI in the second phase. And that in that process, I was made the co-convener of the Legislative and Statutory Committee. There were 4 committees. One, the Policy Committee, the Constitution Committee, the Legislative Committee, and the Administrative Committee. So now I'm raising this so that we get the perspective, because people seem to think that BBI is just about the Constitution. It is not. In fact, the way we work, those of us who are technical experts in the process, and I went in because of my expertise on devolution, on leadership and integrity, on electoral systems, on PWDs, okay? And of course, the whole question of human rights, especially Article 43 on ECOSOC rights, which I call the Common Good Article. Now, so each of the committees did their bits and then made their recommendations, which then formed part of the report. So don't read the report in isolation, read them holistically, all right? Now, yes, it's my duty to explain to you, because since I was there and I'm a member of civil society, it is just fair that I give you feedback in terms of some of the dynamics that took place there. At the apex were the 2 principles. Then the steering committee, the secretariat, and then the technical experts. Now, when we finalized our work in June and we handed over the report, the issues that raised furor after the report was unveiled were not there. We had sorted them out. All the 2/3 gender question, person with disability, the protection of minorities and things like that. However, there was another team which was brought when we were not there to do now editorial work and put all the 4 pieces of reports from the committees together. Now that is where computer error came in. So we had to go back again to sort out that mess, and that is what led to the amendments that were launched the other day at KRTC. So it has been a journey, and I think now you do appreciate it. Finally, on that, I want to say this: when you are reading the BBI reports, read the policy, read the legislative, read the administrative, then you will be able to see a line of best fit. Now, in the interest of time, I will then now look at the report. I must say it was a well-done report, very professionally done, very balanced, very objective.
Yes, Paddy. As you also give us your analysis, I'm sorry, as you also give us the analysis, can you also address some of the issues raised by Wanja on the PWD? I know you've worked at the National Council of Persons with Disability, and it would be very
Yes,
to have you explain those.
In 2 to 3 minutes, I want to say this now. On issues of special interest groups, number one, the Constitution of Kenya 2010 does not define special interest groups. Instead, it lists them. Now, but if you read the entire Constitution, now this is a gap I'm identifying. If you read the Constitution in its entirety, you will find that it gives a definition, but not in one part. A holistic reading of the Constitution leads you to the conclusion that special interest groups are members of society, of our society, with distinct characteristics which are not found in the broader community, which characteristic, when they interact with the other members of society, can either be inhibiting, can be either be barrier, and therefore needs to be addressed. So that's the first thing that we need to know, that Article 100 does not define persons with. So now on, I'm just going to pick few highlights. Now, Wanja has mentioned the loss in the latest in the amended bill, especially in Article 177. The law that we have now revised, because we had already made a legislation on it, and these are the legislation that have been amended, have been revised. The Persons with Disabilities Act, number 1, it has to be repealed within 6 months from the date of the launch of the report. Number 2, Political Parties Act. In order to give effect to Article 177, has been amended to provide that during political party nominations, electoral colleges are established for persons with disability to nominate some of their own to the party. Now, what does that mean? It means that persons with disabilities also will have to take responsibility to be active in their political parties, because you are not going to be a member of that electoral college if you are not a member of that political party. And not just a member, but an active member of that political party. So the issue of representation at the country level has been sorted out by law, which we drafted about 4 days ago, and that is sorted out. The other thing I saw in the report is the finding that by moving the 47 county women MPs to the Senate, the NGAF, or the Affirmative Action Fund, will be lost. No, they are moving with that fund, and the Public Finance Management Act has been amended to give effect to that. Together with that, with the NGAF Act, the public, the Control of Budget Act has also been amended to operationalize how that fund will be used when they are in Senate. So again, there is a gain there, but I must say this: these are just laws. If we do not demand their implementation, strict implementation, we will still go back to the same. And this brings me to what Tabitha said, and what also one just said about lack of political goodwill. Now, we don't have to expect politicians to have goodwill. Politicians are people who are put under pressure to elicit that goodwill from them, and then constant demand for them. Then, in terms of economic gains, we have the Public Finance Management Act has been amended again to create what we call the county treasury. It has been strengthened now, so that unlike previously, where the shareable revenue vertical going to counties had to go to a common county kitty, this time it is going to be routed to specific thematic funds. For example, the health, which is a devolved function, there is a health fund, because now the health commission has been established. There is a county health fund, which will receive direct funding from the treasury, so that provision of health services is not interrupted. Payment of salaries for doctors and health workers is assured, because these things are already budgeted for in advance. And therefore, if it goes to the county health fund, the county governor cannot tinker with that money in terms of shifting it over the place. Now, finally, and a quick one, I want to say that in terms of obstacles, I would have said much, but I want to say this. As we speak now, there is before Parliament a bill for inclusion of, for representation of persons with disability or SIGs in Parliament, which means the Senate and the National Assembly. Now, my position, and which is the position we took as the Legislative Committee of BBI, is that that bill by Kioni does not speak to the intention of Article 100. The legislation contemplated under Article 100 is not the one that Jeremiah Kioni, the representation of special interest groups in Parliament, Bill 2019. That bill simply seeks to amend several other legislation. Elections Act, IEBC Act, Political Parties Act, Election Offences Act, to make it easier for special interest groups to be elected into. It does not deal with the issue of representation of SIG substantively as the Constitution requires. In fact, I do not know how it escaped our minds. This bill is now in the Senate. What we have done is to intercept it at the Senate, and it will be replaced with the one that the committee I co-chaired has developed, which is more substantive.
Thank you.
Finally, all these things, I have done a PowerPoint, I'll upload it so that people can look at it. Finally, the truth remains that as we speak today, this country does not have a special interest inclusion policy. It is not there. So the challenge to this team, in order for us to enjoy SDG 5 and fulfill it, we must begin to work on a substantive special interest inclusion policy for Kenya. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I was rushing, but in the interest of time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paddy. Thank you so much for giving us insights on that. And we are happy that you participated in this process and you've been able to articulate some of the issues, starting by giving us, kindly unmute your speakers. Thank you. You started by giving us a background of where the journey began, taking us back to the post-election violence that we had experienced before, taking us to the handshake and what it entails and where we are now. I'm just wondering, with all the issues being raised, I know there is BBI 1 and now there is BBI 2. Has the train left the station? I think that is the question most of us will be asking. Now that, the signature appending is ongoing, does that mean that the train has left the station and that it is sailed and it is done? That is a question for us to ponder. So I will allow Mr. Tom Kagwe to come in now. I think he's now ready to take over. I had an issue that I had raised based on the 50-50 provision, 50-50 gender representative provision at the Senate. For me, it seems like, this 50-50 agenda can actually be realized. So what is stopping us from applying the same at all levels, appointive and elective position? Thank you so much, Kagwe, and karibu sana. Will you put your video on, if you don't mind, and also make it short in the interest of time? Thank you.
Yes, and Dorothy, as Mr. Tom Kagwe comes on board, if you have any questions, please kindly put them on the chat and we'll refer back to them before we finish. Thank you.
Dorothy?
Yes, Tom.
Now, I don't know. I've been assisted here by my son.
Yes.
I'm using a machine for the first time. I've never used it before. My computer crashed.
Sorry.
So allow me to speak even without the video.
Great, proceed. Thank you.
It will be only 5 points.
Thank you. Precisely. Thank you so much. Yeah, proceed.
I've read the BBI report 3 times. I'm writing a paper. The BBI report is neither black nor white. So I don't like how people paint it as if it's white or black. It's not. It has its good things, it has its bad things. I like the passion of Wanja. Tabitha is my colleague for many years in human rights. Paddy, I've worked with him on this process, including the BBI. The BBI is not black nor white. It has its things which are so good, and it has its bad things also, like interfering with the judiciary. I don't like it. I want also to correct, the second point I want to make is to correct the notion that the CJ, Willie Mutunga, was among those people who said the gender representation is progressive. He wrote a dissenting opinion against 6 judges. Willie Mutunga, I've known him like all my life. He would never defeat the gender agenda. The third point I want to make, the unfortunate story about the gender agenda is that it is phrased within the question of women. It's a national agenda. I served as a commissioner in IPOA. We were 3 men, 6 women. 2/3 does not mean you cannot achieve 50-50. You can achieve it. For example, they create 5 positions, but they don't say anything about the president, the deputy president, the deputy prime minister. It's about people who are leading you and persons with disabilities. To answer Wanja, it has to take deliberate action by human rights activists like Wanja, Tabitha, and Paddy to make these things happen. I worked in IPOA. We had said clearly, we have to recruit people with disabilities in the institution. Because I'm a human rights activist. You make decisions of that nature. I'm not disabled, but I was asking myself, what kind of human rights? These guys will kill me, kill a party. If I don't recruit people with disabilities in IPOA, they will finish me, saying I'm a fake. So if the president, the deputy president, the so-called who will become the prime ministers and the deputy prime ministers, one thing I know, and I will confess to you, I was recruited by Kibaki and Raila. They recruited professionals. The current leadership of the country doesn't care. That's why you have people like Priscilla Nyokabi chairing a gender commission. She's a politician. She doesn't see beyond an election. So when she says it is good for women, I've read that BBI report very carefully. I don't believe, when you look at the powers of the Senate versus taking 47 women away from National Assembly to the Senate, you are crippling women. I'm very clear in my assessment. But it has its good points for especially persons with disabilities. But it doesn't mean that Article 54 of the Constitution, read together with Article 260, cannot solve that problem. So I don't know why they want to change the Constitution, because I know disability is defined very well in Article 260 to include everything, including mental disabilities and all other manner. And then Article 54 provides for 5%. So I don't know why it cannot be implemented the way it is. My fourth point is very clear. If the constitution was being implemented in total, we will not need BBI. I'm not against the BBI, but my final point is this one. I've read the BBI. I'll say this. The Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill, and I've liked my friend Kenneth Odari and my colleague in work, in research, his analysis. But I've read that bill. There is only one thing I can say. To amend the Constitution, you require to read Chapter 19, Article 255, 256, and 257. I don't know what collecting signature means for purposes of what is called popular initiative. I will be very critical of a friend of mine, Raila, and say the following. You cannot close the door for people to discuss about their constitution. It is unfair. I have liked him for many years, but he cannot close the door to Ruto and everybody else. This is a collective discussion. Let's be inclusive. BBI, one of the processes was that one of the agenda was inclusivity. You can't close doors to people. We never closed doors in the Constitution until we reached the final point. I was with the late Zamba Gitonga when we drafted this Constitution, and Otiende Amolo and Bobby Mkangi. We never closed doors to anyone. You listen to all voices until you reach and the ultimate end. I don't think we have reached the ultimate end with the BBI. And any changes to the Constitution and Article 255, there are 10 things which require a referendum. None of them require a referendum. The BBI is supported by Article 256. Parliament can make all those legislative, administrative, institutional changes on its own. The only thing they require is that between the first reading and the second reading, they produce it to the people for 90 days for discussion. So I don't know why everybody is running around saying we need a referendum and collecting signatures. It is a fake story, according to me, in my constitutional world and the way I understand our constitution. And Paddy is an expert too. He knows we can amend the constitution only through 3 means. The second one is Parliament, 256. The third one is popular initiative. I don't know why BBI is becoming a popular initiative. Parliament can change everything they want in law by debate in the House and bringing it for 90 days for us to discuss it as people. My final point, Dorothy, I'll not take long. My final point is this one. I would urge a lot of caution on amendments. I've spoken on TV on this one. I've said I've studied amendments in Kenya's constitution since 1963. They were not meant for people. They were meant to initiate a dictatorial authoritarian presidency under Jomo Kenyatta and under Daniel Toroitich arap Moi. I have seen how politicians behave with amendments. We should be very, very extremely careful about what politicians want to do with our constitution. I'm not saying it's a perfect document. I have my own reservations about issues like, for example, when we say 2/3, we didn't mean women. We meant either gender. When, for example, he wrote about disabilities, we meant this intersectionality that Tabitha is talking about. Women are not just women. Some women are disabled, some are villagers, some are town people. Let's include all women. And that's why, for me, SDG Forum is a great avenue to initiate that debate. And I'm happy I'm in this meeting, because when we talk about women, I have a wife. We are living well. But I have my mother living in my Mahio. I know there is an Atieno living somewhere in Ubungo, in Kisumu. So we have to treat women differently. They are not a homogeneous group. I support Tabitha. She has been my colleague in human rights. She understands what she's talking about. I believe the passion of Tabitha, the Wanja. Wanja is so passionate about persons with disabilities because I know what it means to be disabled. Not because I'm disabled, but because I've worked with people with disabilities. We should treat them also differently, and we have to have a policy focus by the leadership. For example, when they say that they will empower disabled people, what, but they don't believe in it. We need a policy decision made that, for example, if you hire 20 ministers, half of them should be women first, and you are the hiring authority. And then part of them, 5%, should be people with disability. But you see, I know that BBI holds secretariat, and I know how the composition was. But at the top, we had 11 men and 3 women. You cannot have a discussion of disability or women with a group of old people, despite I agree with Paddy that the composition of the secretariat was very good. But we have to agree as a country that any person in a position of power, like the one I occupied, you make a policy decision that you will employ women, you will employ people from the entire country. By the time I left IPOA, 47 counties, we had only missed 3. We had employed from 44 counties, and it was deliberate that we are going to look for a Pokot, we are going to look for a Maasai, we are going to look for a disabled person. It was a policy decision. And I'm happy we were led by a great man, Mashari Njeru. And that's the history I bring to this discussion. We made policy decisions inside the boardroom that we will recruit from the entire country. But when you have a president, and forgive me, I'm direct. When you have a president and a deputy president who recruit from Kalenjin and Kikuyu communities as cabinet, and they don't recruit women, and then they need a BBI to solve the problem. No, we need to solve the problem in their head. I'm sorry, I speak blunt, and maybe that's why I was called here. I was in charge of a commission.
Mm-hmm.
I made decisions based on my background of human rights. And it's deliberate to recruit from 44 counties out of 47. I wish I could have finished 47. That you recruit a Pokot, a Maasai, El Molo. You make those decisions as a person because you believe in humanity. I will end there. But if we want to discuss anything about moving the country forward, we have to agree the president and the deputy president must lead by making decisions, because I've seen their recruitment for the last 10 years. They don't recruit women, they don't recruit Pokots, they don't recruit other people other than majorly in public institutions like parastatals and institutions. They recruit their friends. They recruit Kikuyus, they recruit Kalenjins. We can't allow that to happen. This country belongs to everybody. So BBI should end by agreeing this country belongs to everyone. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Mr. Tom, for that passionate and precise analysis of your personal views and also from your experience on the BBI analysis vis-a-vis the Constitution. From what I've gathered in your presentation is that BBI is not cast on stone. It has its gray areas. It is neither black, it is neither white, and so it lies in between there. There are issues that we can pick that are progressive, but also there are issues that are already provided in the Constitution, and so we don't need the constitutional amendments, and that also the Parliament, we don't need to go to the referendum because the Parliament has also the responsibility to effect changes of the Constitution.
Agreed.
One thing that gender inclusion is intentional, and that cuts across from the top leadership to the grassroots level. So when we talk about 5% inclusion for persons with disability, then it means it cuts across all levels, be it in corporate, private sector, in the appointive position, in elective position, it cuts across. You've just mentioned and given us an example that IPOA, you had 6 women out of the 9 board members that you served, and you worked well. And so it has to be intentional, and it has to have a goodwill. And also as the public, I think we have a responsibility to hold the government accountable because they are elected to represent our views. So the door is not closed. You mentioned very critically that the door should not be closed for the public to continue to express their opinion. And so thank you so much for that, and telling us to be keen on this BBI issue. So whether we choose to say yes or no, but we need to really analyze it and look at the recommendation that this analysis has provided and see whether some of these changes are really necessary. So thank you so much, Tom, for that passionate.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Asante.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Thank you for giving us that preview. And so I know we've handled issues to do with the special interest persons, and we've also touched on the persons with disability. And Tabitha really elaborated on the issues to do with gender. And now I want to hear from the youth. Because as we talk about gender, youth fall in between because youth are either male, they are either female. And so what is the place for youth on the Constitution? What are some of the gains that this Constitution has provided for the youth? And what is BBI bringing on board for the youth? And so I will allow Diana to come and on board. Diana, karibu sana, and please make it as short as possible. Thank you so much. Karibu.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dorothy, and thank you to SDGs Kenya Forum for this invitation. I want to say compliments to the to the consultant who prepared this report. I'm really excited to be here. I had you introduce me earlier. Sorry, I was in transit, but I'm hoping that it was shared that I host a podcast called Diversity with Diana, and what I propose there is about inclusive diversity. Now, matters regarding youth, I'll just pick up from what Tom Kagwe said, although I feel like the seniors that spoke from the sector regarding the BBI report have already covered what needs to be covered, including some of the things that the youth need to be covered. So I'll start with the fact that immediately I shared the poster about this event. The first question I got from some of the people who saw it were like, so Diana, are you pro BBI or anti-BBI? And I want to pick up from what Tom Kagwe said. It is neither you are pro or anti. If you're someone who is critical about policy matters, then you cannot fail to see the positive attributes in the BBI report and the negative, maybe the areas that could need improvement in the same report. So I want to start with that disclaimer for the youth who have tuned in. I know some of you had informed me that you're going to be in this session, but I'm here as a critic, as a human rights advocate, as a proponent for inclusive diversity, which is something that I propose in my podcast that I air every week. Now, matters regarding youth. So that's my first point. I only have a 5-point agenda, Dorothy. I will not exceed the time. I will keep it, but I'll try and be very quick. So anti or pro BBI, I'm here as a critic. The second point is about my fear of over legislation for the country of Kenya. we tend to find fault in anything small, a very great document, maybe because it is fronted by political leaders, then we start reading mischief into it. We start thinking that there's other agendas that you cannot see. And so therefore, already as a public, you're agitated, ready to start fighting against it based on the leadership or the face that you see for that agenda. Now, I like what another speaker said earlier about this gender inclusion being a development agenda and not just a women agenda. Now, when we think about development of the country, I'm a public policy specialist, and I think when I do such public addresses, I like to break down this public policy into language or diction that everyone can understand. It is not for a selected few. It is not for legal minds in Kenya to understand what public policy is, the decisions being made and the implications thereof of such decisions. We have seemed to over-legislate so many things. I've looked at constitutions from other places, and I think the Kenyan 2010 constitution had so many gains that we should actually just focus on implementing what is there. Yes, there are gaps that are not good, especially for us as youth. Looking at Article 55B, which has not been institutionalized. It is there, the provision is there in the constitution, but it has not really been legislated to having an institution that supports it. Now, when you look at what BBI proposes for a youth council, you can say, wow, okay, there's some progress being made. So me being a youth and looking at what BBI proposes, I cannot fail to see some of the benefits therewith. But like what, again, Tom has said, and I think is the last speaker, so I was still taking notes. What he has said is that let us find ways within the current constitution to actually amend some of the policies that need to be amended or the legislation that need to be changed within the constitution. The legislators have the capacity to do this, but I think this over-politicking issues is coming from the fact that the public is largely unaware or uninformed. And so when I forget about over-legislation and move on to the someone talked about history over here, and I'm trying to not repeat the points that have been made before. I know Wanja is not only a person living with disability advocate, she's also a very passionate youth advocate, and of course women advocate as well. When in my discourse of learning about public policy and looking at the history and where we've come from, and I'd like to just point this out for those who are tuned in. When you look at sessional paper number 10 of 1965, which was about African socialism, then you look at the economic recovery strategy under the Kibaki administration. Then now you look at Vision 2030, and you look at the Kenyan Constitution of 2010. All these documents speak to each other. It made me wonder whether it is that we lacked creativity, did we lack innovation as people to think beyond what had already been there. Then what I realized, of course, is that no, it's not that something was lacking, and that's why we have these common pillars being repeated about empowerment of economic empowerment or economic development, social development, the political pillar also having adequate structures or frameworks for representation and inclusion. It's not that it didn't happen. It means that the society is ever changing, and no single change in society happens in a day. So remember, I'm trying to speak in very simple language so that I move away from the public policy diction so that even the young people can understand what I'm saying. When you look at how it has progressed, you look at sessional paper number 10 of 1965, then you look at the economic recovery strategy, you look at Vision 2030, which we are, I think, in the the fourth phase of implementing. Then you look at the Constitution of 2010. Guys, it is all about having the right leaders in place who have the willingness and the consistency to actually implement what is already been provided for. The Moi reforms on education are what made us girl children have a chance to go to school, because our culture back then was a bit not so progressive, especially in the pastoral community where girls were not even being given a chance to go to school. There was preferential treatment on which child is going to go to school. Imagine how far we have come. Now we are here, products of the Moi administration who were given a chance to go to school, be educated, and be part of the society. Now, when I hear one just speak so passionately about representation, I'm excited about representation, but what I'm more excited about is inclusion. Representation means that, in every 100 leaders, we have maybe 33 of them are women. But what about inclusion of them? Do their voices matter? Do the policies that they propose count? I like to propose for inclusive diversity and inclusive diversity that brings about meaningful engagement. Now, I know when we speak about diversity, it has always been misunderstood to being, diversity being misunderstood to being only gender diversity. I had someone talk about, and I think it was Paddy Onyango, who spoke about the
Diana, you freezed? Okay. You're on mute, Diana. We can't hear you.
Yes, I think
okay.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the special interest group, special interest group has not been defined in the Constitution. So I like the fact that, the previous speaker had mentioned about the people with different mental abilities. Someone having a different mental ability does not mean that they are not a person in society that deserves human dignity, human respect, and inclusion. So when I speak about diversity, I mean the difference in age, of course, youth, older generation. We have gender, race, age, color, marital status even. So many other things. So anyone that is different from you deserves equal respect by the fact that they're a human being and they deserve dignity. So I like to educate people from that matter. Then slowly, once you understand that everyone is equal, that's saying one man, one vote, or saying that you have a right to vote is very important, that you understand everyone is equal. Then now you look at the Constitution from the very first chapter and its beginning, about who owns the sovereign power of the country of Kenya. It belongs to the people. Once we have an empowered citizenry, an empowered active citizenry, not just empowered alone and working in the private sector, but empowered and active enough to wonder what is happening in the county that I live in. What is happening in the county development, the programs that we are having? What about the budgets? Who is sitting in that bursary committee? Who is allocating these funds? Who are the beneficiaries of last year's bursaries that were allocated? Such that now we become agitated and we become active citizens. Then we start participating. Now, I don't want to go too far because I'm trying not to touch matters regarding gender, because it has been lovely touched by Tabitha, Wanja, and my other speakers. But I want to say thank you to the BBI team that maybe had our recommendations from the young people. We did request for tax holidays for young entrepreneurs. And our reasoning for this was that whenever you have foreign investors coming to Kenya, they have a 10-year tax holiday. That means for the first 10 years when they're doing a business in Kenya, when they're bringing their foreign direct investments in Kenya, they do not pay taxes for 10 years. We wondered, is it possible to also consider, not saying that we have to have 10 years of tax holiday, but for young entrepreneurs, why not give them a tax holiday to encourage them so that then there's an incentive towards becoming an entrepreneur. Other than walking from office to office looking for jobs, we can say that, wait, when I start my business, I will enjoy a tax holiday for 5 years, even if it is just for 3 years. How many more youths will start coming up with business ideas that will solve some of the economic crises that we have? The other thing that I know that is a gain for us as young people in the BBI is the amendment of the historic injustices regarding like the HELB payment. Many of us went through public learning institutions, many, it's quite a large number, especially after the education reforms that I mentioned earlier. And you can imagine the stress that we have to go through when it comes to repayment of these loans. And the fact that you risk being listed in the CRB, yet for you to get another job, you have to have a clearance letter from the CRB. So as young people, we see some gains being made over there. Now, I'd like to finish up with what Paddy said. In fact, I didn't even have this idea. I borrowed it from him in this session. And this is on the fact that we are having a gap in the special interest inclusion policy. Now, inclusion is something that I've said, beyond representation, I am advocating for inclusion. So this special interest inclusion policy is something that we need to start agitating for as young people, maybe as people from the special interest groups. Having said that, I would also like to say that I do not think that this one thing will stop us from a development agenda or progressing something that is inclusive. Now, to touch a bit on the political side of the BBI, I agree with the fellow speakers that yes, maybe the face of the BBI came out wrong. In fact, we wondered when we were working with the women team, when it came to the BBI agenda and the Embrace movement, when we were working with them, a civil society feeder had been there, SDGs Kenya Forum were there, and we convened with the women leaders, and we wanted to critically look at the 9-point agenda and see how do we gain as women, and how do we actually try to push for amendments that benefit women as this whole political cycle is going. And what we saw there is that, you know, when we were looking to have the women representation in the, you know, in the, not representation, but women inclusion, meaningful women inclusion and participation in the political sphere. We also wondered, why is it that when we talk about BBI, we only see 2 male figures? Where is the third female figure? And then the public would ask us questions. Who is the third female? Are you talking about this? And then they start looking at the faults or the mistakes or maybe the shortcomings that this person has done. In fact, we are very harsh to women. I do not know what it is in our society. Somebody talked about party lists earlier and how patriarchal they are and how it's very difficult to even encourage women to participate in political processes right from the parties, political parties. But I'd like to say that I think, you know, let us support whatever women we have at the top, at the leadership. None of us is perfect. And I'm not here to say that I will propose for any vices that we have in any of the leaders, but I'm saying that any female leader you see, respect them. On the account that, is it Tom Kagwe that spoke about his wife? You know, let us respect women. Let us stop being too critical to, oh, she does this, she did that, she did that. No, let us have inclusive diversity. Support the women leaders that we have, whether they are nominated or elected. You know, let us support them, and then let's seek the critical mass being built at the top. In terms of inclusion, yes, there should have been an inclusion efforts politically, especially with the vice president. I think that is a process that is already ongoing. I think it would be very meaningless to try and push back a development agenda based on the account that someone is feeling left out. I think it's important that we also put aside our personal pride and egos and look towards developing a Kenya that is better for us and the future generation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Diana. I see your passion as you unpack this discussion. Some of the things you've mentioned. Yes, Diana?
No, yeah. I'm sorry, another call came through, sorry.
It's okay, thank you so much. One of the things you've mentioned is about the unaware public. And for me, that is a great concern because youth contribute to 75% of the population. And if we say that youth are unaware, and I'm so sure that even those who are continuing with the signing of these BBI report, some of them have not even had a chance to read it, or some of them, you know, went ahead and you know, signed this document without understanding it. And so that is a critical concern that I think we need to work on as probably civil society, or we have a responsibility to create more awareness around issues to do with civic education. I'm happy that you've mentioned, again, you've reiterated the intentionality of promoting gender equality. And you gave an example of President Moi, who ensured that women had a chance to go to school and acquire the same education, coming from, you know, a scenario where women will be married off, or, you know, the education priority will be given to the boy child. And so I also realized that you mentioned some of the key gains that BBI is bringing on board, in as much as you said, you know, we are in between there. It's a green area. You don't know whether you are team yes or team no. You're in between there. But you say that issues such as the tax holiday will give youth more opportunity to venture into the entrepreneurship, which is one of the target goals when it comes to economic justice and leadership for young people. You also mentioned about help repayment. So that will also give young people time to actually stabilize when they get employment and so on and so forth. I also took note of your keen eye in realizing that the BBI report has been driven by what I would call a patriarchal movement, where no woman figure is actually seen at the top. And so those are some of the things we need to ponder, because you've said it is an intentional move and we have to embrace it. When we talk about respecting women, then inclusion must mean it is meaningful engagement. We will not just put in women and youth for the sake of ticking the box, but engaging them meaningfully. And thank you so much, Diana, for unpacking that. To wrap this session up is one of the key members of the society who is also a beneficiary of the what do we call it, the 2020 Constitution. She is a nominated member of parliament from Homa Bay, and Nerea brings on board personal experience when it comes to women inclusion at the legislative point. And Nerea, I would like you to give us your experience based on, being a nominated member and being an elective member. What are the challenges and what is BBI bringing on board that will help us, bridge this gap that has existed for long? But then I'm asking you a question, Nerea. Is Kenya ready for a woman president?
Oh, thank you, Dorothy. I believe Kenya is ready for a woman president. As to whether the Kenyan will vote for a woman president, that's a matter that we are still working on. The jury is still out. But otherwise, thank you to SDGs Kenya Forum for organizing this all-important session. I think it is timely. But just for avoidance of doubt, I am pro-BBI, and I look at specific issues and gains that that women have made, particularly in political inclusion, because that is, for me, what is relevant even in my current assignment. And number one, being a nominated MCA, being an elected MCA, those are two very distinct things, even though the amendment by the then Senator Martha Wangari ensured that we have parity in terms of nomination and election at the county assembly. And so we are sworn in at the same time as our elected colleagues. But even if we say that, there are two different issues that we talk about. An MCA coming in from a demarcated ward means they're coming from the ballot. A nominated MCA comes in elected by her or his political party. And so one thing that is very different is, the power and resources that are aligned to those two distinct positions. I mean, look at a nomination applies in the Senate and also in the National Assembly. And so I support BBI in one thing, and I like what Paddy said. Paddy, thank you for making it clear that the women representatives from the counties are moving to the Senate, but we are not losing the national government affirmative action fund. I think that has been one thing that is, being said out there, but it's not true that we are losing that money. What is, however, true is that, BBI is making it possible for us all to realize that, even the decision of the court in Katiba Institute versus IEBC in 2017 will have to be implemented. And so if IEBC fails to ensure that all political parties, have met the 2/3 gender principle during the party primaries, then when we get to the election, then Parliament will definitely have to have the numbers for women leaders. It is something that guarantees that it happens. And I can see why Kenyans not very happy with the bloated parliament. I think they're looking at the cost, but in my opinion, they are looking at that cost based on the fact that we are going to have more women. And so everybody's saying, why can't women compete? And so if women are competing, let's marry that with IEBC, ensuring that women are in the party list at the nominations. I prefer a woman that has access to power and resources, which is very limited or low when the seat is nominated. Look at Ngaf, for example. Yes, it has been it was legislated, and we have women who have access to about 7 million shillings for each constituency they represent. But when you look at that money, Dorothy, in comparison to what the Member of Parliament has, and you look at the needs, special needs that women, persons with disability, the young people have, because women representatives are mothers and they're taking care of everybody regardless of what they are and who they are. We are taking care of the men. I am a nominated MCA, and that means I do not have a kitty, and therefore it means that we have to be innovative. I like the word innovative in accessing resources, and that tells you that you need women who have the competence, to have the innovation, to implement programs and access resources from organizations that can allow them to do that. If you have a woman in a position of power, but she doesn't have the resources to match it, then you're stifling that woman. You really are stifling that woman, and we have seen it. I can count on my fingers the great work that is being done by women representatives, but not every one of them will have the network and the ability to go out there and do a lot more resource mobilization. At the same time, we are telling people that we come from a place of competence. I think the one thing that I like and I advocate for as a liberal politician is the matter of substantive representation. I don't want to see just numbers, Dorothy, and I tell Kenyans all the time that I want to see women who can articulate, can legislate, can implement programs, can network. They should get into those spaces. It is very difficult. I'm a CPA by training, and I did a master's level strategic management program at University of Nairobi. And one of the things I was passionate about is the aspect of governance. And so it only followed that I want to look at my passion of governance and leadership. And I opted to quit my well-paying job to come and be an MCA and work within my community. Why did I do that? Because I think sometimes there's a lot more satisfaction for women in coming into positions of leadership. So I am not saying that women cannot come in from a position of competence. What prevents us from leaving our very nicely packaged positions of power in our offices is the fact that the difference in a woman in politics and a woman in the office is stark. It's very clear. Number one, your family is at risk. Number two, the violence you experience in looking for that seat, campaigning for that seat. The cultural barriers. I am a woman. When I want to vie where I was born, I'm told you are a migogo, quote unquote. You have to go to your husband. When I go there, I'm married in Karachuan. They tell me, oh, how long have you been married here? How many sons do you have in this village? What and who tells you you can lead the men who are born in this village? And so if a woman manages to overcome all that and vie for political position, then I, for one, believe that we need to rally behind that woman and support them so that they can be in a position of power. I can tell you, being a nominated member of county assembly definitely is different from being elected because, number one, there is an issue of development that is assigned and aligned to the county representative wards. That is very clear. And even now, we know BBI is bringing resources to each ward through the Ward Development Fund. So that tells us that if a member is elected, have control over predominantly women and also predominantly children that the women take care of. And so I advocate strongly that we look at political parties intentionally, and they must hear this, intentionally work with your women's league, work with women who are capable, are competent, and can legislate so that in your strongholds, because I think this battle is at the political parties, in your strongholds, what women do you have? What women can you support? What women can you ensure have the right political networks for them to vie and win those seats, so that we do not get to a scenario where we have a bloated parliament. And I can tell you, it is very scary even to think that you're going to vie against 15 or 20 men who probably have more resources than you, who are more, who are capable of violence, who are, who own the land. Remember when I sit and I can talk about this the whole day, but my issue is we must speak about these issues. Inclusion in political leadership is something that we are working towards. Look at Vision 2030. We must attain SDG 5 by 2030. The only way to do it is for Kenyans to realize that we are continuously and consistently leaving behind the women. We are leaving behind persons with disability. We are leaving behind our young people. Whatever we have put in BBI is to progressively move towards a good place that we want as Kenyans. That being said, I hear Kenyans who are skeptical about the speed with which we are pushing for BBI. But I also say a constitution is a dynamic document that can be amended at whatever time it is necessary to be done. Look at even the US Constitution has undergone up to 36 amendments. We are saying 2010 Constitution, 10 years down the line, we are looking at amending over 40 articles in that Constitution. This is a start, in my very considered opinion, but I wanted Kenya to move forward with the knowledge and power that, as at now, the biggest issue that we are grappling with is inclusion, because if you have more women, more persons with disability, more young people in positions of power, they will look at how to better employ and give business to others. And therefore, we cannot keep leaving this population behind. And as and when we have another amendment, we have so much that Kenyans are looking forward to. I, for one, believe that there's an opportunity, and I want Kenyans to work with the political leadership. One thing that I want to appreciate, and Kenyans, some of them lose sight of when discussing BBI, is the fact that His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta and Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga, the two of them decided in their conscience to call a ceasefire. And we all know what the country was undergoing before BBI. And so the two of them, it's a case of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because we kept saying that we need Kenya to move forward. We need Kenya to have peace. We need the two people to work together. But then we have BBI now. Everybody's thinking, okay, why are we having a bloated government? Why can't we implement the constitution? But I'm telling you that there's a clear difference. Look at the coalition government. Hardly 2 years into it working, there was already a problem between the two. But now from the 2017 election, you can clearly see that they're starting from a different angle, in my considered opinion. And so what I advocate for, sitting as, the country's Miss President, is even if I don't ultimately win a seat as an area, I want to advocate for women to get into county assemblies, because we need those positions of power and resources as elected members. And number two, for women to get into parliament. And I want the fact that the women going into Senate to make sure that they ring fence the monies that are still going to implement programs for our girls and women. Let us not lose that. For me, I would also love to see a scenario where we have a 2/3. Everybody seems to think, oh, the men take the 2/3 and then the women come in and fill in the 1/3. So everybody says like, okay, we do not have women. I think I like what IPOD did. When you listen to Kagwe, I like the passion and saying that you can have more women and they can lead you. I have held positions of authority over finances. I've managed over 20 billion of resources in this country. Why does somebody think that I only need to be in a position of topping up the gender in parliament? When managing a constituency, the budget is about 140 million in a year. So clearly I am competent. So I believe in competence. I believe we have so many women who are competent. And Kenyans, last year you went through a very public process of seeing how many women are capable of even being presidents of this country. And so we have the women. We have right now the political goodwill that we've never had. And so I think that is what I take from the BBI process. As long as we have the political goodwill, everything, can be resolved, everything can be discussed. So as we look at how to, refine BBI, as we look at how to move towards the referendum, can we see the gains we have made now, take them, solidify them through legislation, because we have a long way to go, and then figure out which ones do we need next for our amendments that are coming. That is what I feel, and I want to urge Kenyans to be very open-minded about BBI and look at things step by step. This is the political process. It takes strong politicians in the persons of Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga to lead such a sensitive process. It takes people who have the right mindset to lead such a process. So we as Kenyans need to be able to offer some level of support so that we can conclude this. And hopefully, I stand for women getting elected. Thank you very much, Dorothy.
Thank you, Nerea. Wow, that was a passionate presentation. I know how passionate you are, and congratulations with the Miss President Award, showing us that women actually can be competent in the way they do their things, and that women, when women are elected, they will not only look at women issue, women are motherly. So when they are attending to these issues, they look, it cuts across everyone on board, and it brings out that inclusion. Something that you've mentioned, I know you've mentioned publicly, you are a pro-BBI. I think there is need for all us to now integrate the issues to do with even the party list. There are some critical things that you've mentioned, but then what is the political party's stand when it comes to ensuring that we have such women? And now that even the Constitution, Justice Maraga the other day just gave an advisory because of the failure of the Parliament to implement the two-third Constitution. What are the sanctions? Is it clearly stated in the BBI report? Some of the issues that will be undertaken to safeguard women, to ensure that they will be able to be elected in these posts without going through violence, and that resources will be available for them to compete equitably with their male counterparts. I also like the idea you mentioned about substantive representation, and that comes with competency, that actually women have all it takes to be leaders. But then how is the election system favorable in terms of embracing their competency and not looking at the resources they have to be able to get into this elected position, which you state clearly that for an elected member, it is quite different. The playground is not level for the elected member and the nominated member. So for us to enhance or increase the number of women leaders in the political participation, and not just the number, but bringing the substance with it, how do we ensure, how do we play a role, the integrity, the integral role that all of us can play from both sectors to ensure that we have more women leaders in the political field. And so because of time, we are so much gone beyond the time limit that we had. And so I don't know whether I will only allow one person who has a very burning question, just one person, or at most two people for the sake of inclusion. Two people with very, very burning questions that you would want to direct to either of the panelists, and then we will proceed from there. Any? Okay, so allow me to proceed because of time. I will give the panelists again one round just to give us their final remarks on this discussion, on the analysis of BBI report and the enhancement of gender equality. So I'll start with Tabitha to give us just the final remarks as we proceed. I think Tabitha will be followed by Wanja, if she's still there. She mentioned that she would, she may jump out. So yeah, any of the panelists who is ready to take after Tabitha. Thank you so much. 1 minute, Tabitha.
Okay, thank you, Dorothy. As I stated, I'm trying to, multitask. I'm in this meeting and I'm in another one. So, but I've decided to stay on because this is a very important discussion, which I felt I couldn't just leave. Allow me first to make a clarification in regards to what my friend Tom Kagwe alluded to about Honorable Priscilla Nyokabi, just to make it clear to everyone that Nyokabi is not the chairperson of the National Gender and Equality Commission. Rather, we have Dr. Joyce Motinda. Nyokabi is just a commissioner. And in this, I'm here for me as a gender specialist so that I'm able to look at what gains do we have in the BBI and what are the gaps, so that I'm able also to guide the discussion in terms of if the train has left the station, then what do we have in terms of the gains? And I think whether BBI goes through or not, or even the constitutional amendment bill, we still have the constitution. And I really like what Nera, the passion I've seen in her in terms of the gender agenda. So if we have the constitution, the question we should be asking ourselves as main stakeholders in this is, what is our role? What is our role as individuals? What is our role as the CSOs? Are we playing our role? Are we monitoring as the National Gender and Equality Commission? If the commission role is to offer oversight and monitor the promotion of gender equality and inclusion, are we doing that? The implementing partners, are they implementing accordingly? And going forward, we need to change our attitude. We need to change, our cultural beliefs and traditional practices, so that we are able then to address issues that lead to retrogress what has already been gained. For me, there's a question you had asked, Dorothy, in terms of merging women, PWDs, youth, and the answer is no, because we've already said about intersectionality. The women, the PWDs, the youth, they all have different needs. They all have different interests and concerns. And so if we match them together, then we lose addressing those needs and concerns. And so, and even when you look at the normative framework, even at the international and the regional level, they're very clear. If at that level we are not combining the women, the PWDs, and the youth, why should we do it, we as Kenyans? And so I agree even with the presenters and the panelists when we say we want to see inclusion across board, whether it's at the political sphere, it is at economic sphere, at the public, sphere, we want inclusion across board. And if it is inclusion of women, we have to be in a position to clearly understand the intersectionality of women and even the men, because gender is not just about women. Lastly, I think it's good also to make a clarification about GAF. I had Paddy talk about this, Neria has talked about this, and it's good to appreciate that if we have the allocation of 35%, that would be like over Kenya shillings 500 billion. And the 5% that would go in excess to 25 billion, it's way above what we have in GAF, which is 2 billion. And also it's good to appreciate that we are not losing GAF here, because GAF will continue as per its regulation. So I'm not here to support the BBI or to reject the BBI. Mine is just to bring it out and for us, all of us to understand. But the thing I like more about BBI is the fact that the BBI seek to protect and entrench the Article 43 rights. And when we try and analyze the issues that women undergo, we know that in the economic social rights, we have women suffering more and compared to men, or even when we look at the COVID and what is happening, the effects of COVID. So if we have the president of the day addressing Article 43, that means most probably we'll be able to follow through and track the success and the impact of Article 43. So I think I'll leave it to that, but the gender agenda will not happen overnight. We have to fight for this. We have to understand our roles. We have to change as individuals, as institutions, and do what we should do as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tabitha, for reminding us that we have a role to play in advancing the gender agenda. So next, Paddy, are you there for your closing remarks? Kindly
yes,
make it 1 minute. Kindly make it
yeah,
1 minute. Thank you.
First of all, thank you, Mheshimiwa MCA, and allow me to address you as Mheshimiwa. I want to assure you that the issue of nominated MPs and MCAs being considered as bonga points is no longer going to be there. It has been sorted out in law. And then finally, on the question of violence against women during the electoral process, the Election Offences Act has been amended to make it an aggravation if violence is meted out against a woman candidate during an election period. We have amended the Elections Act to provide for what constitutes an election period, and within which period, therefore, any acts that are criminal become election offenses. One of those is violence against women during that period. For example, if it is common assault, and you can have domestic assault anywhere, maybe 6 months to 18 months during the electoral period. If a woman candidate is subjected to some violence, political gender violence, then it is an aggravation, and we have proposed that for such an offense, during that time, the penalty would be 6 years of imprisonment or 7 million in terms of fine, or both. So, in other words, I'm saying, please read the BBI with all the 4 limbs: the Constitution, the legislation, the policy, and the admin. Many good things are there. And we had a good reason to separate these from the Constitution Amendment Bill. Thank you so much, everybody. It was nice being with you. Let's hope that we'll keep this conversation going. Thank you.
Thank you, Paddy. Thank you, Paddy. And thank you for assuring us that the train has not, we are not left behind in terms of making our inputs on the document. Diana, karibu sana.
Thank you. Thanks, Dorothy, and thanks to everyone who's tuned in today. I must say I've learned a lot in this session. It's very good to always bring together great minds to learn issues that pertain our country. My appeal to the young people that have tuned in is just ensure that you become an active citizen. I think these are closing remarks. There's nothing I can say that will top up what has been summarized, what has been included in the report, and many other things. I'd say let us be active citizens, be active. Be an active participant in political processes, in matters regarding public affairs. Be informed. Do not allow yourselves to be used by other people, whether it is political leaders or people holding different opinions. It is good to respect a difference of opinion, but know that the passion that beats in our hearts is all for the country, and therefore let us just progress the development agenda. Thank you very much, Dorothy.
Thank you, Diana, for reminding us of nothing for us without us. And so youth need to venture into the space and drive the gender agenda. Next, is Wanja there? Wanja? Probably she pulled out. She was on the field, so we understand. I will let Tom. Tom, are you there?
I don't think so.
Okay. He had also mentioned that he might pull out at some point. Okay, so Nerea, we will give you this chance to also make some final remarks and encourage the women to take up this space. Nerea? Hello, Nerea.
There is strength in coming together. I can hear you. Yeah, that's good. So there is strength in women coming together to support each other towards election. We have competent women who are sitting in offices afraid of declaring political ambitions. please declare, let us work together to get in. The other downside of it is we already have women who are in positions of power through elections. I am personally asking you to ensure that you bring another woman closer to your space. I have had challenges with a lot of them pushing out up and coming women leaders. We cannot get the critical mass of women if the ones in power are the very same ones who are removing our name from lists that are going to meetings to negotiate for better things on behalf of women for BBI. So that's something that we have to work on. Number 3, ensure that we have a lot of people networking together. It's very important. And finally, we are going to get into, after the referendum, a scenario where we have a lot of legislation that are being enacted. So we need to consistently stay abreast of what is happening at what time. So Parliament is going, National Assembly is going to be very, very important next year. As we look for votes, as we campaign, women, do not forget to speak to your members of National Assembly, because we need priority for inclusion. We need that, the legal issues to be handled, because if it's not passed, then we are done for. I want to appeal to our members of Parliament. Please, we know we have experienced problems and challenges in passing the 2/3 gender bill. Through BBI, we have political goodwill. Please find it in your conscience to be present. All the women leaders, be present in Parliament. I appeal to our male members of Parliament to be present and support us. Pass the legislation, support us so that we can work to a more inclusive Kenya. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much to our panelists. I want to appreciate you for creating time and for sharing with us your expertise and your analysis of the document that Kenneth has really made it simpler for us to understand. And I believe this has been a session for us to learn, to unlearn, and also to relearn. And so probably a call to action is to ask all of us to play a part in terms of driving the gender agenda forward, that we cannot stay mum or keep quiet when the gender agenda is being talked about. So in our various spaces, in our various decision-making spaces, there is call for solidarity for all women to stand up and contribute to this agenda. And so I want to thank you. I want to thank SDG Kenya for convening us this afternoon. It has been a great session for us to know the direction women's participation or women's empowerment, women and girls empowerment is going in as far as the Constitution of Kenya is concerned, and also as the BBI proposals is taken into account. So thank you so much. I want to hand over to Rose. Asante.
Thank you, Dorothy, for really moderating this session. If you look at the time, we actually thought that would do it in 2 hours, but it's been engaging, it's been rich, that 2 hours was not enough. And even the 3 hours, I am sure most of us would have wanted to continue having this conversation. And yes, indeed, we are going to continue with these conversations. On behalf of SDG Kenya Forum, I want to thank all our speakers who were here today, who brought in a vibrant discussion from different perspectives, and each of us have learned something, maybe something new, but each of us have learned something from the various discussions that we have. I want to thank Ken for really just giving us a very rich report that is balanced, that looked actually at the the constitution that we currently have, as well as the the SDG Goal 5 that for us, we are really interested in and focusing on. And therefore, Ken, thank you for such a good job. I want to thank everyone, each one of you who took time today to be part of this session. And the question that actually Dorothy has left us with is, where do we go from here? The first thing is that we are going to share the report. I know we had already shared with some of you, but the rest of you who have shared their emails here, if you haven't received the report, kindly share your email. We are going to share the big report. We are going to share the summary that was also done due to the amendments, as well as the PowerPoint presentation. We are also going to ask our panelists, those who had reports, also to share with us so we can share with you, so that as we are talking about, this has to be a call for action and a call to action. We are able to take some of the points that have come out of this very rich discussion moving forward so that we can move with them in the right direction. Let's continue engaging. Once again, from the SDG Kenya Forum, I want to thank all of you for being with us today. Asanteni sana, God bless, and do have a good week, as well as enjoy your lunch this afternoon. Kindly share your emails. We are going to collect all of them so that we can send you the report. Asanteni.
Thank you. I want to request all of us to put our videos on so that we can take a photo. It's important that we take a photo for this session. If you could all just put your videos on, a request, kindly. Okay. Nerea, I see you with your baby. Nice. Even the babies are participating. They're the future leaders. Thank you so much. Wow. Thank you. Great, great, great. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And bye-bye from us. Asanteni. Great.
Bye. Bye, everyone.